Okay, so what do you do when you have a weird sign and house situation? I am using Britney Spears today because she is Libra rising, and if you've learned a little bit of astrology or enough to be dangerous, you know that it gets weird when you have Virgo rising, Libra rising, Scorpio rising. And I'm not trying to pick on you guys, it's just that we get into upside down world where you can find yourself scratching your head of like, what on earth does this mean, right? So basically, what you want to do every time is start with the sign that the thing is in. So, regardless of where it is in your chart, you look at the sign first. So, I'm doing nodes and eclipses today. In this case, she has a North Node in Cancer in the 10th house. So, North Node in Cancer, if you're looking at a book on the nodes, you crack the book to the chapter on Cancer and you read that one first. Because the sign is the behavior and the house is the location. But what I've found is trying to parse that is pretty difficult because we as humans, when we wander the earth, we're not thinking about like, oh, I'm at work, therefore I am in the location for the behavior, which would be, North Node in the 10th house here. So there is, in this chart, there is a lot of good energy to be had for being a professional, being out in the world, being recognized publicly for doing a certain thing. That's a 10th house situation. But the behavior is Cancerian behavior. So that would be being in touch with your feelings, being very like forthcoming with what's really going on, being okay with being vulnerable, being okay with having emotions and showing emotions rather than kind of having a stiff upper lip. Because the Capricorn South Node behavior is being rigid, being controlling, being super hardworking. And the location is the 4th house, which has to do with family. And often, if you see South Node and Capricorn in the 4th house, that would be hardship, like family hardship, restriction, that can be controlling parents, or just beyond that, a family where you're very rigid and controlled for whatever reason, because Capricorn is all about control, and then also success, like the need to be successful and have drive. She, specifically in this chart, has Venus on the South Node, which can be a number of things, and a number of things have played out in her life where you kind of nod and are like, yeah, I can see that. And I won't get into them a heck of a lot today, but things on the South Node can be gifts. So what we can't deny is that this person has a gift for performing, and that gift for performing ultimately did lend itself to enacting or embodying her 10th house North Node situation. It's just that it came from the 4th house South Node setup. And the South Node is behavior that's overdone, and it is also the lens through which you see the world when you look at your own South Node in your chart. And I'm passionate about the nodes. I'll never stop talking about the nodes. I've said that before, I'll say it forever, because they explain a lot. It's somewhat comforting to look at your South Node situation and be like, oh, that's why this never works for me, or oh, that's why I act like this. And it's also comforting to know that there's an alternative at the North Node of like, you don't have to live an entire life looking at the world through this one lens. There are other lenses that you can try. You just need to be brave enough to actually try and understand that it's going to be very foreign and very weird feeling. Okay, so anyone with a North Node in Cancer would read that Cancer chapter first. They would read the Capricorn chapter, They would read the Capricorn chapter second, because the traditional Capricorn house is the 10th house and the North Node is in the 10th house. And that would be confusing because when you read them, they are the opposite from each other. So you would need to apply critical thinking skills of ultimately you need to do Cancerian behavior in a Capricorn setting. So basically, in this sense, you need to not stay home. You need to not listen to what your family's telling you. And I'm sorry, but like, that would be the advice that I would give this person of you need to not be so rigid with the way that you see the world. And you need to actually go out into the world and be okay with being vulnerable with like who you truly are at your core. And I don't know how that would go, honestly. But I have run into this problem with people, especially with the Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio rising. So let's do a different permutation of this. So what if you are Libra rising and then you have a Sagittarius South Node in third house and a Gemini North Node in the ninth house? Honestly, for me, the third house, sixth house, ninth house, and 12th house are the hardest ones because they're mental houses. So it's like, how do you do something mentally differently? Okay. Having Sagittarius on the third house is often like an expansive worldview of your immediate environment. So, you go exploring where you live and you look for stuff in different cultures where you live. Hopefully you live in a place that has like more than a single Chinese restaurant, but you can also espouse an accepting worldview, because Sagittarius can be very broad and accepting, or it can be very dogmatic and like, this is the right way. There is no other way to view things than how I view things, which is through this multicultural lens. So you can run into issues where you are lecturing people, or you're the smartest person in the room, or you want to broaden other people's horizons in your immediate environment. And they're always with third house stuff. You want to be mindful of your relationships with siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, family members who are not parents or grandparents. I think aunts and uncles can also fall into the sixth house sometimes, depending on which expert you're reading. But third house is about communication and siblings, short trips, immediate environment, and early education. Like, it really depends, but let's say up through high school. So it can be really like going with what you know and only what you know. Like if you haven't seen it before, it doesn't necessarily exist. So that's a third house South Node. If you don't know it, it's not there, or being the expert in the room. I've given a lot of examples. Okay. Then to Gemini in the ninth house. So the ninth house is about leaving your immediate environment and going and exploring. So essentially, you should travel or keep getting degrees. Just be an eternal student of advanced education. Keep learning stuff, keep broadening your horizons, keep traveling, but in a really open-minded way. Because Gemini is about conversation. It's about it's a speedy sign. But it can be a pretty open mind, blank slate type of thinking. And again, like this is backwards. So being open-minded about travel, being willing to take in cultural perspectives that don't agree. Ninth house is also a religious house, so flitting about all of the different world religions, getting multiple graduate degrees. I'm talking about kind of like, I'm trying to match behavior in house. It would depend on the person though. But what you want to do is get away from the immediate environment or voices that you typically hear, because the third house south node would be kind of locked into a perception or worldview informed by the people around you. And there can be a hesitancy to accept different perspectives and points of view, but that's the whole point of the ninth house, because in the ninth house, we expand the way that we see the world. But it's via going places that you don't normally go, which is ninth house behavior. So that might sound a little bit rambly. Maybe it was. I'm doing my best. This is not the first time I'm doing this video. I did it wrong the last time, so I'm doing a new version, so I'm going to say this again. I knew a guy who had a south node in Libra in the first house, and so he had a north node in Aries in the seventh house, and he took this to mean that he would never be in relationships. And hey, guess what? He had gotten beyond a certain age that, like, it was a little bit of a red flag that he'd never been in a relationship longer than 6 months. And, he's got a north node in the seventh house. And so I was learning astrology. This is like back in the olden days. And he thought I was telling him he would never date anybody. And I was just like, no, that's not the case. Like, regardless of the sign that it's in, if you have a north node in the seventh house, you have some great energy for meeting people and working with people and dating people. And even if you keep saying no to everybody, they'll keep coming back to you and being like, hey, hi, are you interested in me yet? So there's usually a lot going on with the seventh house north node. It's just that the pull of the first house south node and the lens through which you see the world is like, I gotta go it alone. Only I can do certain things. Like, you need to be a leader. You need to push forward. You have your own personal agenda. You don't necessarily think about what other people want. You don't necessarily factor other people into the equation. So I wasn't saying you're never going to date anybody, but the issue that I found with him was he was super passive aggressive, which is a Libra trait, no offense. But Libra on a bad day is like trying to convince you that what they want is also what you want, or assuming that what they want is also what you want without asking you. So that was happening, and I was just like, do you hear me when I talk? Because regardless of what sign is on your seventh house, the seventh house is about listening. Like, Libra is about listening, but the seventh house is also about listening, and then also hearing and processing what's being said. It's important. Okay. So that's another good example. Okay, let's do this. How much do I want to challenge my brain? Yeah, I guess. South node in the 12th house in Virgo, and north node in the 6th house in Pisces. Like I said, these are the hardest houses for me, but I think that it's important. So having Pisces on the 6th house in general with Libra risings, I'm not picking on you guys. I swear I'm not picking on you guys, but it's like, typically with Pisces on the 6th house, you can be a little wishy-washy about health stuff as a general rule. Like, you can have some pretty Piscean beliefs. And it can, this can kind of go two ways. So again, the sixth house is typically the Virgo house. It's often, not always, but often, when Libra rising people do Virgo behaviors, they have like this sense of looming catastrophe, because the Virgo energy is in the 12th house, and the 12th house is a subconscious house. So things can get like the nitty gritty, the minute details, or the like what can go wrong, which Virgo does love to do, can blow up to epic proportions. And Pisces, sixth house, it also isn't going to help because it's the Neptune house, or sorry, the Neptune sign in the house that likes the nitty gritty details. So if you had the South Node in the 12th house, generally, the behavior of the 12th house is not encountering the world directly, so being pretty indirect. Often when there are health hangups, and this is regardless of what sign is involved, they can feel pretty out of control and overwhelming, but also you can somatize your feelings, because it's like if you're not dealing directly with stuff, they will find a way. And so the sixth house North Node is like understanding that when you have certain symptoms, that means something, and then applying that meaning, and also figuring out the remedy for that thing and applying that remedy. The sixth house is about encountering things directly, but then also with, if the North Node was Pisces, the spirit through which you want to do that is a broad view, in a sense that it's all going to be okay. Like everything's going to be okay as long as I take these steps. So the 12th house is about not wanting to deal with stuff, and 12th house South Node people can be reclusive, can be, not necessarily are all, but there's a lot of like, no, this will all work out. Sixth house North Node is like, how? Tell me how it's going to work out. Do a thing toward making it work out. There can be psychic gifts, for sure. I've seen it a lot. Or people who just like know stuff. And then you're like, well, how do you know that? And they're like, I don't know, I just know. And then it turns out that they're right. Happens a lot. But you have to like apply this knowledge somewhere. And so that's what we do in the sixth house. There can be gifts with a North Node in the sixth house, again, regardless of what sign it is, for working in, medical might be the wrong word, but like healing would be the right word. Healing environments. So environments where there are healers, be it doctors or whatever, like whatever appeals, whatever floats your boat. But the caveat here is, if you know that you have these gifts and you don't use these gifts, and then you sit around with the South Node in the 12th house, like feeling overwhelmed by stuff. The 12th house is a sense of overwhelm, and then not taking action in the present moment to do something about it. You can develop something chronic. I'm not trying to like say this will happen, but you can develop something chronic where you have to be in a medical environment. Not ideal, but again, I've seen it happen. Sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it's not so temporary. But this is one of the houses where, like, if you have a sixth house North Node, challenge yourself to take concrete steps toward fixing something that you know is wrong, fixing something that you know is broken, and also putting stuff in order. There, regardless of the sign, with a sixth house North Node, there is a tremendous ability to organize chaos into something. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about eclipses, because I want to show you how to do that. So here we are. We're going to consult an ephemeris And then I'll show you a different software that actually maps eclipses. These are kind of a grab bag and mix and match. I have multiple softwares. And then you can also use astro.com for this. But I think prenatal eclipses are important, and it's becoming increasingly clear to me that they are a variable in the node conversations. And I think that that's where my work is taking me right now with astrology. So they're not well known. There's one good book that's a Jan Spiller book on prenatal eclipses that I will link in the description should you be interested. But here's how to look them up. So Britney Spears, born December 2nd, 1981. We go to the ephemeris, which it's literally a list of where things were when. And I queued it up to December 1981, right? So these are the moon phases. This is iPhemeris, the software, and this is, they list the moon phases, and then they'll also list eclipses here. So now we have to go back in time because these are prenatal eclipses, and we're looking for 2 prenatal eclipses. We're looking for a solar eclipse, and we're looking for a lunar eclipse. Sometimes the eclipses, in order for them to qualify to be put in a chart, you need at least one lunar and at least one solar. It's possible to have a total of 3 eclipses, so you can have a double lunar and 1 solar, or a double solar and 1 lunar, but you need to basically like go back in time so that you have solar and lunar. So wherever until you collect both, you don't stop looking for eclipses. It's not possible to have 4 eclipses. It is possible to have 3 eclipses. Okay. Sorry, that's kind of confusing. So we're going to go backward in time. Nothing. Eclipses. It says eclipse. Okay. So the solar eclipse is July 31st. And then the moon phases over here tells us what degree the eclipse is. So 7 degrees Leo. And the lunar eclipse is July 17th. But then you can see, because this does it in Greenwich Mean Time and then Central Time, for me, because I put myself in Central Time, July 17th or July 16th, and then the lunar eclipse was at 24 Capricorn. If we were to go forward in time, which we wouldn't, but there's an example of a 3 eclipse situation in the future. Show me. Okay, so solar lunar. I'm making my point badly because I did not properly prepare. Okay, here we go. So I'm sorry, but we're now in June of 1982. So let's say that you were born June 22nd, because this would need to be a prenatal, so before birth eclipse that you're looking for. If you were born after June 21st of 1982 until the next eclipse, which was, the next month. So between June 22nd and July 6th, before this lunar eclipse, you would have 2 solar eclipses. So because there's 1 solar, and then you go back. Come on, please. There we go. And then the second one, and then a lunar eclipse. So we did solar, solar, lunar. And then also it's possible to have lunar, lunar, solar, but you need 1 of each. And then you stop looking. Anyway, back to Brittany. I said 7 Leo and 24 Capricorn. We go back to her chart. 24 Capricorn is the lunar eclipse. It's here in the fourth house. And then up here, 7 Leo. This says 4 Leo. So 7 Leo is like right here in her 11th house. So she would crack a book about this, crack the book, because I don't think that there's more than one that I'm aware of. But if there is, tell me, about the prenatal lunar eclipses. She would read about solar eclipse in Leo, and then she would read about solar eclipse in, Aquarius. Why? Because it's the 11th house. So she would recognize some of the attributes of Aquarius, probably not all of them, because it's an 11th house solar eclipse. And she would recognize some of the attributes of Leo, because it's a Leo solar eclipse. Similarly, she would look at the lunar eclipse in Capricorn, because that's the sign of her lunar eclipse. And she would also look at lunar eclipse in Cancer. And she would use critical thinking skills of there's going to be some hang-ups with emotional sensitivity, because it's the 4th house, and the description of a 4th house lunar eclipse, regardless of what sign it's in, is hang-ups about like fully feeling, embracing, embodying feelings. Usually there's a degree of oversensitivity. And so learning how to flow with your emotions and not get locked up with them is one thing. But then the Capricorn lunar eclipse is also learning to take responsibility for stuff, and not just letting things slide, taking concrete steps to be responsible. And then in the 4th house is for family, for emotions, for making things work. So it's a little bit dicey, and you need to use critical thinking skills and probably read the 2 chapters that don't agree, but thinking about, okay, what are the highest potentials for a lunar eclipse? Because the lunar eclipses are the things that we're bad at. What are the highest potentials for someone with a lunar eclipse in Capricorn? What are the highest potentials for someone with a lunar eclipse in the 4th house? And then trying to enact those things, and then probably going back 2-3 years later and seeing like, okay, I've made some progress in these areas, but not so much progress in these areas. So let's work on this now. And it's iterative, regardless. North Node work is iterative. Lunar eclipse work is iterative. You don't get this right overnight for no reason. If you're self-aware enough, you get slowly pulled toward the right behavior over time. If you're not self-aware enough, this can be kind of like a deathbed regret of like, I wish that I had tried harder or done more, or like not necessarily not made specific decisions, but like if you do the work that seems foreign to you, it builds over time. And with the knowledge that astrology gives you, just to be clear. But if you stick with your South Node lens and just assume this is the only way the world works, you usually just feel stifled and limited and frustrated and angry. And that's why I do this work, because it's like, there is another way. You can use this to have a much more rewarding life. It's not the easiest road, but it's the more rewarding road, and I recommend it. But it has to do with self-awareness and trying new things, and not all of them necessarily work, or at least overnight. They don't necessarily work overnight, but with time and effort and the willingness to try, you can change your life using this. So that's why I do what I do, and that's why I've done this today. But like I said, I'm going to show you a second software. So this is Time Passages, and here's Britney Spears with the same chart. I don't know what I did, but it looks slightly different. Oh yeah, no. It was because it's the wrong day. Oh my gosh, I got this far and I put in the wrong day. Like, this is strange. Okay, now it's right. Thank you for bearing with me. Here's the solar eclipse and it's mapped. And here's the lunar eclipse, and it's mapped. So in time passages, solar is 1 dot and lunar is 2 dots because lunar is in opposition, and I think that it's trying to show that. Astro.com maps these for you. So different softwares do different things, but this is, you can double check your work, which I should have when I've already done this video and I screwed it up, so that's why I'm doing it again. So that's that, and I'll have more to say on the eclipses in the future, but for now, that's Astrological Critical Thinking. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.